We have much to cover today, everybody. I'll show two things because I flip flop a little bit. This is that Nestor PowerPoint, that chapter 5, where really a lot of the information on the handout, sort of the chapter outline that I did. These are the times that you should be familiar with again, vis-a-vis pasteurization. The original one, though, they don't show it here, was the batch method at 62 degrees for roughly 30 minutes. And again, now typically this is what's done more than anything else because of the time in commercial pasteurization, and all the products we consume basically fall into it. And this is that ultra pasteurization is a little bit different. I mean, because effectively you're putting this into an environment that can effectively be shelf stable, and that's very, like I said to you, that's interesting. And really the interesting point about that is how we approach things here in our shopping as opposed to what's done throughout Europe and a lot of other areas of the world. You're going to the market on a daily basis. So cultures are different, and it's sort of an interesting reflection, I think, about that stuff. But that's me. So I'll move back to where we are, which is from the textbook, and you're more familiar with, and this is where we're going today. So, and a few other things, and again, I'll flip between that back and forth because, again, the illustrations are somewhat more helpful there. So, again, all of this one, because it's really, pasteurization is a kind of disinfection. These are typically spoilage organisms that cause gastrointestinal illness. They're certainly not limited to that. All of these things, and there's some things that are much more likely to be problematic than others. So heat applied to the liquid to kill potential agents and infection and spoilage, and retaining both of these, the food value from a taste perspective and a nutritional. So it's not just solid; it can be liquids, it can be solids, whatever. And so now we get to the one that is the most significant, which I'll have a better picture of it, and maybe you have seen one. This is called an autoclave. Effectively, it is a pressure cooker. So with that, you don't have to know anything about the apparatus, but effectively the way it's constructed is you have a series of basically stainless steel metal trays that have holes within them so the steam can pass underneath the area filled with water, and occasionally you have to change it and run cleaning cycles. That's something interesting my first wife taught to my staff about how to clean and how to do all those things. So maintenance is important if you're ever doing one of these by yourself. And don't think for a minute that might not happen to you. And effectively, you put it on these multiple trays. Some are the big ones in the hospital are much larger, as you might suspect. And it's all self-contained, and basically you plug it in and set it. And what will happen once you have everything in there, you close the door and seal it. So it's effectively a vacuum seal. And effectively, that's what a pressure cooker is. And it all basically, it goes down to that, to chemistry, what's called the ideal gas law. Does that ring a bell with anybody? PV equals nRT. So what happens is, since you're holding the volume constant, it's sealed, it can't expand. As you increase the temperature, increase the pressure. And eventually, you get to the magic number the way that they're set. So it doesn't matter. And again, I told you this before, I'll write that again, it's important. 121 degrees Celsius, and that'll be 15 psi or pounds per square inch. And they'll have a temperature gauge and a pressure gauge to make sure it's standardized, and typically 15 to 20 minutes. I used one of those on the test. I wouldn't put both of them because they would both be correct. If I did, they would certainly both be correct. And again, my office, I did 30 minutes to get plenty of time. And the limitations are what you can put in there. There are heat-resistant plastic, but a lot of stuff works. The limitations, surgical instruments are very expensive, and you have to treat them very, very carefully. That's why you'll see when you look, like I'm surprised you didn't see it up in the lab, and of course I forgot to get one. But if I can possibly remember, maybe Friday, is you always replace surgical blades. You use the blade handle. The blades would dull. In the old days, they would dull very easily. So the blades are sterilized separately, and the blade handles pop out onto the field. And then You open the, then you can flip on the blade handles. Whoever's what used to call scrub nurse, or whoever's the surgical scrub tech, will pop those on. You got to pop on in a special way to make sure you don't cut yourself, which is always a bad image. And so and that way, because the blades get dull very easily just from contact with all the yuck when you're operating. So I would typically have a minimum of 2 and 2 blades for skin, because once you cut the skin's not sterile. Once you cut the skin, that blade's useless to go in there deeper. You have to pass we call it the skin knife. You pass the skin knife out and go to a deep knife and do your dissecting inside. I mean, just giving you some idea of what's about this. So lots of things can be utilized. In the old days, it's ready to put down to water. You had a washer, you had a dryer, surgical gowns, towels, everything was washed and utilized. Now we have paper disposable. Paper you can't use, you're going to see that's going to go to the gas pipe. That's different. And there are heat-resistant plastics, but our Petri dishes are sterilized with gas, the ones that you see, and they're in those. If you look in the lab, on the bottom shelf, you see whole bundles of them that have been sterilized with gas. You take them out. The interior of the dish is stable, so we take the hot liquid in a big giant flask and pour carefully, typically with an asbestos gloves, something like that, very heat resistant. So all of these kinds of things. So what works is really important. So pressurized steam is what we're looking for, and effectively you're superheating the steam. So without going into any more details, because you can read that stuff, but you really don't have to. Once we get to 121 degrees Celsius, at 15 psi above normal, a total of 2 atmospheres, be 121 degrees Celsius. That's the magic number. Hold it there long enough, it's taken care of. The whole idea, again, you have to remove the organic material. You have to things that we would utilize all the time that were there, and so and what you see in a hospital, every surgeon will have, like, they keep a book. Okay, this is whatever, this orthopedic surgeons or this vascular surgeon does it. So you have your tray. So when I would go in there, they say, oh, your card, you use this suture material, we have that ready, etc., etc. Bonus points for you to know all these things. But if you're going to work in a clinical environment, be aware of this. All those little things people really appreciate, because there's so much going on. If you have everything set down in advance, all that stuff kind of comes in. So I'm telling you that for a reason. How people react, it's a measure of your competence and your interest. Okay, it really is. So we know about incineration, flame of a Bunsen burner. Ouch! Stay away from that. Okay, so be careful. Hot air ovens have been used for a long time. Okay, the dry ovens are usually electric. I had one of my mentors utilize that type of thing. Sterilization is longer, as you can see. It's really the idea of being an hour is wrong. I mean, typically to me, I'd have a 400-degree oven, Fahrenheit oven, which is about 200 degrees, maybe a skosh less, Celsius, for at least 2 hours. And you have to lay them out singly, like on a sheet pan, put parchment paper, have some fun. So they're just showing you some examples of these. I don't know what it is specifically, but again, those are the numbers that are there. I'll flip over for just a second before I get to cold. So I don't mind doing the back and forth if you don't mind me doing it, to give you an idea, because I can show you some other stuff with the illustrations. They're giving you an idea of what it is. Okay. The more stuff you in there, the more you have to take it. So you have to look at the manufacturer's guidelines. This is what I told you about flash sterilization. That's that one. If the instrument has really not been significantly contaminated, you just want to get sterile for some reason. If it went out of the field, it was handled or mishandled, whatever thing. I mean, that's what large operating room areas will have that, particularly if it's an instrument that there's not a lot of duplicates about. For instance, I mean, I don't know how many they have today, but they had at the time, I had a minor procedure to remove a lipoma, fatty tumor from my neck, benign, nothing major, common. And I was at West Penn for the procedure. They had 16 operating rooms working. Busy. Just to give you an idea. So if somebody else might be using that instrument and there's only 3 of them and 2 of them are being used, that's why you do that type of stuff. And this is the idea. Prions, when I first started teaching it, they thought it was 135 degrees for 4 hours. We're getting closer, but we don't know. So don't presume. And you see, you can have this. We do this. You can have liquids, easily enough, dry things, whatever goes in there. It's a very useful environment, and this is very really straightforward. This is interesting, everybody, and it's important. We use pressurized steam. Steam has got to penetrate. That's the important thing. Some of you, how you place them, teach you about that. Understand, these are chemical indicators. Sterilization is a biological process. The fact, and you'll see this is called autoclave tape. Autoclave tape, when you put it on, put what's in there, you put the date, and when it's on the outside, typically these paper wraps have these paper wraps, but they are in such a way that the steam will penetrate. You usually double wrap it in case it inadvertently tears on the outside, it doesn't tear on the inside. Where you open a pack, if the inside is still intact, you could use it if you had to without re-sterilizing it. So that's why we call it double wrap sterile. You would learn about all that stuff. What happens when you heat it, tape on the outside, these lines are chemical on the paper and they turn black. That does not mean they are sterile. Again, if you're working environment, what does this mean? It means they were in the sterilizer and the tape turned black. It doesn't necessarily mean what's done inside is sterile. Okay? Again, sterilization is a chemical, is a biological, not a chemical process. They even put little indicators for a piece of this tape inside. And while I open it up, it still doesn't mean it's sterile. It means the heat got through to it. The way it is sterilized, sterilization has to be addressed biologically. And what they do in the hospital, we did not do this very well. I was happy with it. I really was. Because I knew the machine worked well. I knew it worked well. I knew it was sterile. Because we had to test it. But in the hospital, this is all about record keeping. These contain endospores. It's got a fancy name. It's called Bacillus stereothermophilus. It's got the highest heat sensitivity. So if you get that one, all the other endospores will come. So what you do is these vials are put in. This one vial is put in, and with the sterilizing run, each time it is run. And what happens is when everything is removed, this is removed, and it's like one of these special containers where it activate and release chemicals that are in there, and they will cause, and they put it in an incubator, just like you're doing in the lab. Color typically will change from this, which would be broad, probably it's called dioglycolate, so you can have things for anaerobic, and it'll turn colors. If it turns colors, that's bad, because it means something is growing in there. Theoretically, it should be sterile. And so in the hospital, what they do is for each run, then they will basically, this is run X. All the things they'll put aside. It'll take maybe 24 to 48 hours to get those results. They will not release those instruments. And when I told you about inspectors coming in, they'll go into central supply, let me see your records to make sure what was good. You have a record of one of these endospore containing tubes that have been proven not to have grown for that particular run. That gives you an idea of how important it is. I can't emphasize enough. This is about documentation. And documentation is basically keeps your posterior from being sued, or being part of a lawsuit, which is not a pleasant experience. I have been on the business end of those. Okay? Not fun. So biological indicators confirm, not can, but do confirm the lack of microbial growth after autoclaving. This is just, again, it's just heating, and they phrase it very, very well. Go on from there. It's different when they do commercial canning, because what you're worried about for a consumable is botulism. And so They basically the industrial size ones are a little bit different for commercial canning. It works. What you're going to see, what's really important, is that in low acid environments and anaerobic conditions is the perfect growth media for that. That's why if you're canning and putting up things at home, you have to be really careful to follow the manufacturer and make sure they are done properly. And if you have any degree of suspicion, don't use it with those mason jars and heating them. And when they get the seal on them, you really have to know what you're doing to be able to do that. Don't play fast and loose with those rules. The one that gives you the most leeway are things that have a lot of acidity, like tomatoes. Tomatoes are extremely acidic, so they're very unlikely to have botulism in them. So canned food is commercially sterile, endospores, some thermophiles, some agents, but they are not the ones, okay, that typically impact us. The botulism is the big player for consumers. So we go backwards here. I know it's a little jump back and forth, but I think I want to give you the full effects on it. I don't really have a lot else to say about that, but just to be watchful. Again, the limitation if you're using dry heat, like a commercial oven or an oven at home, if you had to use that in a pinch, or a toaster oven, if you had to use it here, or in an office setting, is time. Time's a luxury that a lot of folks don't have. Cold is not anything that's going to be destructive. It is merely transient. Okay, slows the growth, whether it's a culture, whether it's a microbe, and it basically gives us an opportunity to utilize those things and prolongs their consumability, if that's a word. So they're not adversely affected by gradual cooling, refrigeration, or deep freezing. Okay, a lot of the stuff we get will be in the freezer, so they will preserve cultures of, particularly we just use bacterial cultures. Okay, and we get something called freeze-dried cultures we get from the lab. So what they have done, the problem with freezing, if you didn't know, what really gives you instability in living things like bacterial cultures, or like foods when you freeze them, I said, is mishandling. What happens is water's the medium. So if you mishandle them and jostle them around, cells are likely to be disrupted, just to start with. And that creates problems. Additionally, that will release more fluid. Any type of liquid or water component in there, when it freezes, ice crystals are crystals, okay, they will penetrate cells, cause the cells to be damaged. So, I mean, I know I like to do cooking stuff. If you look on it, it's called IQF, individually quick frozen. If you look for things like that, they put them on a sheet pan, they put them into a commercial freezer, bang, 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 they freeze them. And then once they're frozen, then you can put them into whatever, a bag, a couple, some top bags, whatever. That's how you do it the right way. So if you're doing like stuff at home that you want to freeze and do that, and you just don't bang that thing in and toss it in. Okay, be careful with it. But that's a mistake, and I mean, I've seen that because like a lot of folks your age and younger, where do we start work? We work in the food business. We work at fast food places. I worked in what was called a candy store luncheonette. We had a counter. So it's a different age. Everybody it used to be a soda jerk in the comments because you'd be pulling the thing. Did you ever see old movies or new movies with people doing that type of stuff? The kids went to the malt shop after school. I'm a stranger in a strange land. So drying is to desiccate. Exposed to normal room temperature, gradually they dehydrate. Okay. Water is so significant. Okay. Freeze drying is a very effective. It's not easy to do at home. We have a food dehydrator at home. Okay, that we utilize when we get a lot of stuff out of the garden. We can dehydrate that stuff at home. Where stuff that's sitting around, you go, I don't want to lose it. You can dehydrate it at home. We have fun with it. We don't use it all the time, but it's one of those neat little gadgets we like. We're one of those people who go camping and backpacking. where they really have to, they're hiking and they can't carry a lot of stuff. They dehydrate a lot of foods because water is fairly easy to get, and so you can rehydrate them fairly easily. That's so it's useful. We're a little crazy. Moving on. Heat is the major method. Again, radiation is a big player, much bigger than you would think. Radiation, when you look at the visible spectrum of light that you and I can see, is comparatively limited by wavelengths. If you go on the blue side, okay, you get because this is more blue to violet. We have ultraviolet, and this is the wavelengths they're getting, as you can see, shorter. That's the wavelength. The shorter the wavelength, the greater ionization power, meaning that's the destructive power. Ionizing radiation is what destroys things. It destabilizes DNA. That's why we do radiation therapy still for a lot of cancers and a lot of other problems. It can be very destructive. It was one of the early treatments for things. It's been refined over time, but it's still utilized. So, because unfortunately, a lot of cancers, they don't respond to chemo. They have to use radiation. They have to use a combination. Radioactive implants have been used for a long time. You learn about that. Ultraviolet is not. Ultraviolet, as we will go over a couple of times, does this. Creates thymine diamonds. Remember, when you have a strand of DNA, what do you have? A's, T's, G's, and C's. There's only 4 of them, so periodically you're going to get some thymines that are together. And what it means, because it's a double strand, remember the twisted ladder, like a zipper, it kind of puts a bump or an irregularity, this dimer, bonds them together. That's what ultraviolet does. And effectively, the zipper can't open, which means it can't replicate. So it's not a useful means of killing the way gamma rays and X-rays are, but it's a good way to stop it from growing. I do not know if you'll do it in the lab. We have a lab where we do this. I don't know if you're going to do that, because we have an ultraviolet cabinet, and you put different bacteria, because ultraviolet doesn't penetrate, and all you'd have to do is put a 3x5 card on one half of the plate. Okay, a simple 3x5 card on one half of the plate, and expose the other side of the plate, and you'd see the other, depending on the amount of time that the exposure was there for, it would basically stop that. You do the old, take the Q-tip or the loop and you plate it out evenly across, spread. And on one side, you're exposed to the radiation. The other side, you won't. The side that has the card on it, it will grow normally. So it's not very effective, okay, but it will stop it from growing if it is exposed at least for a period of time. So it is used a lot in water treatment. It is used a lot we used to use it a lot in dentistry. I don't know if they still do that now. It is used a lot in the food industry. So the way a lot of restaurants and dining places work, they do the prep work in the morning, and they have that stuff all ready to go, and everything is made to order. So you've got veggies chopped, you have mirepoix, which is carrots and celery and onion, and if you're doing Trinity, add green pepper or whatever peppers you are, and all that stuff is out. All the cilantro is out, all the parsley is out, everything, bang. That stuff's not going to last very long if you leave it out. Basically, they've got it under lights like that. All of those neat little things you don't necessarily see. So it's really, food industry is very interesting, and that's one of the big problems. When anybody plays fast and loose with the rules, youch. Okay, that's the quickest way to go. More than half the new restaurants that open don't last more than 2 years. The last thing you need to know is to have the health industry come in and go, ugh. If I see one of those and they publish them, I'm not going there to eat. I'm sorry. So here we go. Ionizing radiation, highly effective for sterilizing material that will be damaged by heat or damaged by chemicals. It's used all the time. You'd be surprised how much use you have to look for the little moniker that's on there. We use it, as I said, sterile blades is probably the number one thing it is used on. So these are gamma ray machines, X-ray machines similar to those used in medicine, but a little bit different. The items are placed, irradiated with enough to make it sterile, and then stop. They're typically already sealed. Those blades that go on are sealed in it's like a peel apart, maybe aluminum type material packet. That's there. So the radiation will penetrate through and the blade will stay sharp. It is done in the food industry as well, which surprises people. There are a lot of foods that they utilize radiation. They don't publicize it, but there'll be some indication on the packaging if you look, because people think, oh my God, I'm going to die from this. It's a buzzword. Ultraviolet is different. It's low energy. It does not penetrate. That's why but you can stop them from, it doesn't kill them, but it can stop them from growing because it interrupts that DNA replication cycle. Readily through air, slightly through liquids, poorly through solids. The object must be disinfected must be directly exposed for its full effect. That's what I mean. You don't have covers on it. And they're showing this is water treatment that it can be used for. There's ample utilization of these types of things. Fancy name, we call them thymine dimers because it makes it easy. And I don't want to confuse you. Thymine and cytosine are pyrimidines. Purines are adenine and guanine. I had that on the test for A&P. One, you might unfortunately remember and want to throw things at me. Too bad, it's all over. You got through. But so just use thymine dimers, and that's what I mean. And what happens is it's like having a bad zipper. It's like hate that. Filtration. This is another mechanical or physical type of effect. Air and liquids, it's strained through. It depends on the openings. So there's really limitations in size. There's a variety of other materials that are used. Like if you have a pool, diatomaceous earth is a really useful agent that's used a lot for pool filtration. We used a sand filter we had an above ground pool when we had one. And so you can control these. The pore sizes can be controlled and really obtain sterilization. I'm unfamiliar with it. I just want you to be familiar with it. It is used a little bit. So things that can withstand heat. So look at serum, blood products, vaccines, drugs, IV fluids, enzymes, media. Because effectively this stuff is handled in such a way that you know what potential contaminants are, and you have to avoid heat. The trouble, as we will get to when we get to vaccines, is they do put preservatives in, and that's coming when we discuss the chemicals, and that's coming up soon. So I hate the term milk and beer cold filtered beer. It's been around for a long time. I don't know about milk. Okay, cold filtrations have been around for a long time. Water purification, big player. So, and the ones you're going to have the most experience with are these HEPA or HEPA, depending on how you want to pronounce them, filters all the time. They're much better on everything. Viruses are a little bit more difficult. These are the kinds of filters that you have to trap things in an operating room so things are not swirling in the air. You'll find that we have a TB patient in the hospital. That'll be it's a reverse isolation process. So they'll have an exhaust fan going with one of these filters to trap them in the room. I've been stuck in one of those. Okay, not because of the tuberculosis. My middle one, when he was a year and a half, the old Children's Hospital, which is down by Presby, the new one up in Lawrenceville, was the old St. Francis Hospital. So that he was having a GI workup, working up possibly for cystic fibrosis, which he didn't have. And he was in here for like 3 or 4 days doing a workup. He's not infected. So they put him on the floor with transplant patients and patients with multiple orthopedics. And All of a sudden, we heard from somebody that 2 days before the play group they had at the local YMCA that he was playing in, they had an outbreak of, ready? Chickenpox. And so immediately we had to tell them, if you don't know, liver transplant patients will die from chickenpox if they are exposed. Their immune system is totally unable to cope with it because you have to immunosuppress when you're doing this operation. And this is Pittsburgh. This is liver transplant. We're liver transplants. This was 87, 88. Eric was born 84, maybe 80, 85, 86. So we told them, and they put us into this isolation system, sucking that out of the room. Whenever they would take him down for procedures, they had to wrap him up like a mummy, that type of stuff. We weren't allowed to go in and out of the room other than to go to the bathroom. You got to do the overnight stuff. Always. I mentioned about not having children. That's it. So they're just showing you how they filter, and that's fine. Okay, this is how you preserve a lot for traditionally salts and sugars, hypertonic environment. There's lots of other ways that you can use, but it's been used in centuries is the way to describe it. Pickling means you preserve it in acid. Smoking means you're heating it gradually to impart flavor, but enough to destroy a certain subset of microorganisms. Smoking can be cold smoking or hot smoking. Okay, and drying's been around forever like that. So typically the combination is they would put some type of a cure, which is typically a mixture of salt, sugar, and flavors on something and let it suck out all the moisture. And then sometimes after that, they would smoke it or not smoke it. So if you're fond of smoked salmon, as I am, that is how it's made. My wife took a bite of it one time and goes, "It's delicious." She goes, "But it's raw. I'll never eat it again." I said, "Good, more for me." I looked at her, I goes, "We have this stand on." I go, "It's smoked and cured." She goes, "It's raw fish." And so it's not a sterilizing technique. This is just food preservation. I have a lot of information about that. But now we get to the fun stuff. I do it by, I do the escape thing again. I do it, this is the other. So physical heat, moisture dried, mostly moist, radiation, ultraviolet, gamma rays, X-rays, filtration, like I said, mechanical activity of washing your hands. As far as I am concerned, that is the principal way that why that is an efficient process to at least limit the number of microbes on your hands, which brings us to chemicals. I'm going to show you a chart that I will use. And I do this by category. Okay? I think it's important to know the categories because manufacturers have different names for different things. So why am I doing it there? Same, and it's all the same stuff. It's the same manufacturer. For instance, this is a good chart to show you a little bit about the X-rays. So they will have some kind of thing that's in there to let you know it's radiation. So it's got to be visible. It's up to you to look for it. A lot of times people go to this when there has been something in the news about contamination. They start buying a lot of this stuff. Okay, reactive high energy gamma rays, sterilize heat sensitive materials after packaging, variety of foods, but some consumers don't want to eat them, as you might guess. Hey, thank you. High pressure we use to some food products. It's very difficult to find. The one that I see this used the most of is guacamole more than anything else. So you're able to do this and maintain the color that's so characteristic. Okay, I like to make it fresh. Just me, but there's a lot of great ones that are available in the store for people who don't want to take the time and the trouble to make it. That's fine. These are just summary pages. That's why I like this. We're going to look at, for us, it's either sterilants, when we start to use germicidal chemicals, or things that are not sterilants. I don't really like to classify between high level, intermediate, and low level. Okay? It's, you would, from our context here, I mean, there's a lot of different cleaning agents and things that you could use. At the very least, if you're doing something that you would consider to be non-critical instruments, at the very least, you would have to use something at intermediate level, but I will never ask about that. So, to me, is it a sterilant or not? That's something important. Who regulates it? Disinfectants are used on inanimate objects. They have a lot of problems associated with them because of fumes, of irritation to the skin, potential damage to the environment. So they are controlled by the Environmental Protection Agency. These are the governing bodies. It's important to know that. Things that are considered antiseptics utilized on living tissue are controlled by the FDA, one or the other, typically not both. And so in order for them to be useful, you have to follow the appropriate instructions. You can't play fast and loose with the rules because it won't work the way. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. So when you're in micro lab, what do you do with tables when you either before or after? Should be both. Pardon me? We spray them with bleach. Okay? That bleach is not like bleach coming out of, you're going to buy a Giant Eagle or it's diluted. It's just as effective. Bleach is just as effective and much more useful, and it maintains itself. You dilute the bleach with water, it lasts for 24 hours at peak effectiveness. Do you think they have changed those recently? I'm not a knock. You can ask Mrs. Maurer. She'll probably tell you. She's got enough to do on her plate. If you have her, she's got to be, but has to be in charge of 2 departments and all the labs and basically handling all the administrative work with math and science. And she's one of my best friends here. It's very hard to do that. Okay? That's really what you need to do. Some solutions have to be changed out every 24 hours. You'll see that when we get to this. But we weren't using bleach. We were using glutaraldehyde. I'll tell you about it. But that was the first thing when my staff would come in and say we start seeing patients at 9, 8:30, change out all the solutions. It's part of the stuff that you got to do. It's just college, you're not working with anything super dangerous, probably more problematic with somebody coming in coughing and sneezing. Really, none of the organisms are gonna bite you unless you're compromised. And that's why I tell all the students, you got something going on, tell Dr. Dress, tell Mrs. Bauer. You'll be working with penicillin. If you're allergic, here's what you do. Don't touch it. Should I use this? No. Got it? I present it humorously, but there's a point. Again, when I jump around and do silly things, it's in the hopes that do you know what that doofus was doing? So, there's lots of things that we do to select, okay? Lots of different things. If it's very toxic, do we really want to use it? Limited things, as you will see, work with organic material. Some things do. That's why they were in soaps for a while. You can't use it on certain stuff, okay? You got to watch. Residues are sometimes desirable, but not if they're toxic or corrosive. Residues means it stays there for a while. It's a good thing, as long as it's not hurt. Again, you won't think about cost dependent. You might, and storage. Things that are concentrated take up less room. That stuff I was telling you about, we reconstitute. We have little vials. We don't have a giant office. Okay. And environmental risk. That's very significant too, because that's again maybe part of your responsibilities depending on the size of what you're. And I realize if people are not in this field, just take it. So I'll get to all of these. I want to show you the important chart. these charts on these 2 pages. 2 pages. They go over. I'll ask you a question. For instance, this might be A, B, C, D, and E in a test question. Okay? It will be something based on its chemical family. Its antibiotics are the same way because they have a lot of different names. Okay? So we'll get to all of those kinds of things, whether we're dealing with cephalosporians or penicillins, okay, lincosamides. There's lots of different names. That it's better to know them that way. If you're walking into that building that we're, over there, the white building over there, to have another pharmacy exam, there's one every 2 weeks. You tell me. All that stuff on the board, be afraid, be very afraid. They do it by category. Be happy I'm helping you. And so that's how I do it. And so metal's a metal. Hydrogen peroxide is a peroxygen. Phenols are phenols. We'll talk about them. Quats, quaternary ammonium. Okay, biguanides, aldehydes, alcohols. Ethylene oxide is a poison gas. It's not as complex as you would think, but it's important. So each of these play a role. I'm going to use this one at least for now and go back to the other one. Well, I think it's a nice introduction when we do these things. For instance, now there's lots of different ones. Sensitive, bite stains, whatever's in there, free and clear, whatever it is. There's EPA, government, safer choice. These are probably ones that are more environmentally safe. It's like detergents and things like that we use. I mean, it's very important. And a lot of major healthcare facilities, one of the largest facilities in the New York metropolitan area is Hackensack Memorial Medical Center. It's enormous. It's state of the art. Okay, they switched to all environmentally friendly type disinfectants wherever possible to avoid people inhaling and coming in contact with them at a tremendous cost. That's a very large hospital. One of my family's relatives was the chairman of I think he was the chairman of the board of trustees, an anesthesiologist there, at my age, much smarter than me. And another guy, and he's probably still seeing people as an oncologist there. Well, Mark's probably about 80 by this time. Brilliant, smart, maybe the smartest guy. That's one of those very, very elite medical centers, just to give you an idea. So it depends on what you're using, and this gives you some ideas what to use at home. Okay? I mean, in hospitals, we have sick people with respiratory problems. There's a lot to think about with this. So we'll start quick because we don't have a lot of time left. Alcohol. It's over there. 60 to 80% aqueous solutions of ethyl or isopropyl alcohol. Typically, when you go and buy rubbing alcohol in Walmart, Giant Eagle, 70% isopropyl alcohol. Sometimes in the lab, as an alternative for gram stains, you will use like 90% or 95% alcohol. You can use that for the decolorizing step. We decolorize, you can use that. Typically use a mixture of alcohol and acid. Just saying. It doesn't work against endospores. You're going to see it doesn't work against naked viruses. Basically vegetative, not a lot, but we use it all the time. Denatures proteins, principally works against membrane. Okay, pure alcohol is less effective, so we end up using that's why we use a percentage. So that 70% seems to work. You can go to the dollar store and buy alcohol cheaper, but it's typically 50%. It's not nearly as effective. It may be commonly used as a disinfectant. It is not a disinfectant. You got nothing else to wipe something down with an alcohol, go for it. But it's definitely an antiseptic. It's non-toxic, it's inexpensive, and it's no residue. What makes it great is what makes it bad. It's right here. 15 seconds, it's gone. It's great because you go up there and do it for hand care. It's a very easy way to get rid of things that could cause problems. It gives everybody save walking around from room to room in the hospital with wet hands, getting moisture on the floor, using up a whole lot of resource, a lot of towels and a lot of paper towels and soap like that. Okay? And really the dripping, because then you have fall risks. And people are very comfortable using it. We don't bat an eyelash if somebody goes over and does their hand. And people just they can't avoid one. I told you that. You see when it's like it's a pull. It's like me and a piece of pizza. I gotta go. Occasionally smile. Thank you. One person smiles. My whole class. What am I gonna do? So, and there are some limitations of where it is. When you see the term tincture, it means that it's more than 50% alcohol. When you dissolve something in alcohol, when you dissolve something, typically we either dissolve it in water or alcohol. If it's more than 50% water, we call it a solution. If it's more than 50% alcohol, we call it a tincture. We will get to that famously with tincture of iodine, and we'll get to that famously with tincture of methylate, but we will not get to that today. Thank you very much. Wasn't that illuminating?